was a dense night, and the darkness was tremendous, and became a curtain that seemed to want to erase the small town of Hollow Creek from the map. Inside the white chapel at the top of the hill, the sound of raindrops hitting the roof mixed with the whisper of mechanical prayers, words spoken more out of habit than faith. The dark wooden coffin was open in the center of the hall. Inside, the body of Eleanor Price, matriarch of the Cole family, looked smaller than in life. The skin stretched across her face, her eyes closed as if she were just waiting for the right moment to open them. On her chest, a necklace with a strange symbol, a circle crossed by 3 lines, like claws. Margaret Cole, Maggie to everyone except her mother, sat motionless in the first row, her face worn out, deep dark circles under her eyes, fingers squeezing a handkerchief until her knuckles turned white. Beside her, her husband, Ethan Cole, tried to appear strong, but the clenched jaw revealed a fear far beyond grief. Behind them, their 2 children, Olivia, 16, and Noah, 10, watching everything with the discomfort typical of those who don't yet understand death well, but feel that there is something wrong in the way it is being mourned there. What bothered Noah wasn't the coffin, nor the smell of flowers. It was the persistent sensation of being watched, not by the living, but by the expressionless faces of those strange people scattered across the back pews. There was something about them, something in their fixed gaze, in the way they murmured among themselves, always staring at the necklace on Eleanor's chest. When the ceremony ended, Maggie approached the coffin for the last time. She ran a trembling hand over the necklace. "I told you to get rid of that," Ethan whispered. "She never removed this necklace. Not even to sleep." Maggie whispered back. "She said it was family, for the good of all of us." As the coffin was being closed, one of the strange women from the back pews approached. She was tall, thin, with gray hair tied in a very tight bun, and eyes so dark they looked like bottomless wells. "My condolences, Margaret," she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Your mother was important to many of us." "Thank you, Mrs. Agnes," she replied quickly. "Your mother spoke about you often, and about your children. Her legacy continues. It's beautiful to see that." Olivia felt a shiver crawl up her spine. Noah stepped half a pace behind his father, clutching Ethan's coat. The woman tilted her head toward the boy and, without asking permission, touched his forehead lightly with 2 fingers, as if marking something there. "He has strong eyes," she murmured. "He will see what others do not." That night, they returned to Eleanor's old house, where they would stay until they finished organizing her belongings. The house stood isolated, surrounded by tall trees, a kilometer away from any neighbor. The old wood creaked with the wind, and the interior smelled of mothballs, candles, and something metallic, like dried blood. Family portraits covered the hallway walls, but they were not ordinary portraits. In many of them, the faces had been scratched out, erased, replaced by round shapes without eyes, marked with the same symbol from the necklace. Olivia stopped in front of a large frame, where Maggie's young face was still intact. But the woman beside her, Eleanor, had her face covered by a dark, almost black paint, as if someone had tried to bury her inside the painting itself. "Mom, who did this?" Olivia asked. Maggie swallowed hard. "Your grandmother had strange rituals, paintings, symbols, things she said were protective. That's all." From behind them, Ethan felt the weight of the house settle on his shoulders. It wasn't just grief. It was as if the air inside was denser, heavier, filled with something ancient and hungry, shifting in the dark, satisfied to have them back. When night fell, the house seemed to shrink around the family. The windows rattled with the wind. The old living room clock struck each second like a hammer against a coffin, and from the attic came a soft rhythmic sound that no one wanted to admit hearing. 3 slow knocks, followed by an almost inaudible whisper, as if something upstairs were waking up. 2. The first manifestation of horror. The first night in Eleanor's house was a silent chaos. Each person locked themselves in their room, trying to ignore the creaks of wood and the whispers of wind that seemed to pass through the walls, not outside them. Noah was the last to sleep, not by choice, but because something in the room kept him awake. It wasn't the rain, nor the tree rubbing against the window. It was the sensation that someone was sitting in the corner, near the wardrobe, where the lamp didn't illuminate well. He curled in bed, gripping the sheet to his chin, staring into the dark. "I know there's nothing there," he whispered to himself. "It's just shadow, shadow, shadow." But the shadow seemed to breathe. His eyelids grew heavy, and he almost fell asleep when he heard the first knock. Thud, a dry, heavy sound coming from above, from the attic. He held his breath. Thud, now louder, closer, as if the whole ceiling were vibrating. Thud. On the third knock, the lamp flickered, the light dimmed and returned weaker, as if the house had swallowed half the electricity. Noah heard the floor in the hallway creak, bare footsteps dragging across wood. His bedroom door, which was only slightly ajar, opened by a millimeter, too slowly for wind. In the next room, Olivia lay in bed scrolling on her phone, trying to get internet signal. When the Wi-Fi disappeared and the screen went completely black for a moment, she complained in annoyance. But what made her drop the phone wasn't the connection failure. It was the reflection on the screen. For a fraction of a second, she saw herself, and behind her, in the corner of the room, something tall, thin, completely still, like a body wrapped tightly in a sheet, faceless, no apparent arms, a dark silhouette, unmoving. She spun instantly. The room was empty. The phone slipped from her hand. The sound of it hitting the floor echoed too loudly. The silence afterward was almost aggressive. At the same moment, Maggie was in her mother's old room, searching drawers for documents. She found only boxes of medicine, old letters, used candles, and a hard-covered black notebook tied with a red cord. She hesitated before opening it. The notebook felt warm. When she undid the knot and lifted the cover, a strange smell rose, a blend of burnt incense and iron. The pages were filled with drawings of the necklace's symbol repeated dozens of times, alongside words in a language Maggie didn't recognize. On some pages, however, there were notes in English, written in Eleanor's slanted handwriting. "He chooses through blood. First the sight, then the name, finally the body. The child must see before being seen." Maggie frowned, turning the page. A list of dates appeared, some crossed out, others circled. At the end of the list, a name written with such force that the paper was slightly torn. Noah. A cold wind swept through the room, even though the window was closed. The extinguished candles on the dresser lit for a second, pale flames, then died again. The notebook tilted in Maggie's hands, as if trying to slip away. In the hallway, Ethan walked checking doors, trying to convince himself everything was just suggestion. When he passed the portrait gallery, he noticed something different. One of the frames had fallen. He picked it up, heart racing. It was a painting of Noah, still a baby, in Eleanor's arms. But Eleanor's face had been completely erased, and in its place someone had painted the outline of a faceless figure, with the symbol in the center. Below the frame, on the wall molding, someone had written in dark, nearly dry paint, "He has already seen her. Now she sees through him." Before Ethan could call Maggie, all the hallway lights flickered simultaneously. The living room clock stopped at 3:03. For an instant, the whole house seemed to hold its breath. From Noah's room came a scream that tore through the silence. And it wasn't just fear. There was something else, something distorted like another voice trying to scream along. 3. Revelations about the curse. Ethan burst into Noah's room with his shoulder, heart slamming in his chest. He found the boy sitting in bed, eyes wide open, breathing fast, tears running down his face. "There's someone here," Noah kept pointing to the corner. "She was there, staring at me. She has no face, Dad. She has no face." Ethan turned. Nothing was there, just a damp wall and the long shadow of the wardrobe. "It was a nightmare, son, just a nightmare," he said, though his voice trembled. Noah shook his head desperately. "She touched my foot. It was cold. She said my name, but her mouth didn't move." Maggie appeared in the doorway, notebook in hand. her face as pale as the bedsheets. It wasn't just a nightmare, she whispered, more to herself than to them. Hours later, when Noah finally fell asleep from exhaustion, the couple went down to the kitchen. The house seemed to watch every movement. The clock remained frozen at 3:03, even though dawn was creeping in outside. "I found this in my mother's room," Maggie said, placing the notebook on the table. Ethan flipped through the pages, discomfort growing with each symbol and phrase. "This is some kind of diary." "It's more than that. You saw Noah's name. She wrote our son's name here. And it wasn't by accident." The last pages contained long texts, more recent ones, where Eleanor wrote about commitments, the circle, and the promise made before Maggie's birth. There were newspaper clippings of missing children from Hollow Creek over the decades. On some clippings, the children's faces were circled with the same symbol drawn in ink. "She was part of some cult," Ethan whispered. "That isn't religion, it's a cult." An old photograph fell from between the pages. Eleanor, younger, stood next to three figures that Maggie vaguely recognized. Agnes, the woman from the church, a tall man in a dark suit with a disturbing gaze, and another woman with short hair and an empty expression. They all smiled for the camera, but the eyes were wrong. Something seemed too alive in them. On the back of the photo, a phrase, "The one who watches through the third face. Our Norveth. Our king in shadow." "Norveth," Ethan murmured. "Must be some demon they invented." Maggie turned another page and found detailed notes of a ritual, instructions on how to prepare the host and open the child's eyes so Norveth may choose. Words like 3 knocks, the 3rd hour of night, and the house's body repeated. "She brought us here because of this," Maggie said, voice breaking. "Not just because she was dying. She called me, remember? Insisted I come with the kids. Said it was important to reconnect the blood." Ethan gripped the notebook so hard his knuckles turned white. "We're leaving, Maggie. Today, we pack our things and—" The lights went out, plunging the kitchen into sudden darkness. A second later, a dim red light flickered from the hallway, like candlelight, or many candles. They exchanged looks. The air grew colder, heavier, as if invisible water were filling the house, drowning every breath. "Stay here," Ethan whispered. "I'm not staying alone," Maggie snapped, rising. They moved together toward the living room. The light came from the floor. When they reached it, they realized it wasn't one candle. It was 12, arranged in a circle on the floor near the old rug. In the center, something had been drawn in a dark substance, glimmering under the flickering light. The symbol, always the symbol. And around the circle of candles were photographs, their photographs. Maggie knelt, trembling, picking one up. It was Olivia on the porch of their old home, taken from a distance. Another of Noah at school, one of Ethan leaving work, one of Maggie asleep on the couch. This wasn't here," Ethan whispered. "This didn't exist yesterday." On the wall above the circle, ink began to drip on its own, forming irregular letters that crawled like worms. "You have returned. The blood keeps its promise." Maggie dropped the photo. The candles danced as if a breath passed through them, but none went out. Instead, the flames stretched upward like pointing fingers, and for a moment, they both heard clearly, not an echo, not wind, Eleanor's voice whispering, as if standing right behind them. "Do not fight what already belongs to him. Norveth dislikes disobedience." 4. Escalation of terror and irreversible consequences. The next morning it felt as if the entire house had rearranged itself. Rooms seemed larger and farther apart, the hallway longer, doors heavier. Sunlight entered through the windows, but it arrived weak, dim, as if it lost strength crossing something invisible. Olivia avoided going through the portrait hallway alone. The night before finally sleeping, she swore she heard footsteps behind the paintings, as if someone walked inside the walls, dragging fingers along the plaster. That day she decided to explore the attic. Not out of curiosity, but out of unrest. She felt that if she didn't go up, the attic would keep calling, knocking, whispering, until she went mad. The retractable ladder groaned violently when she pulled it down. A cold draft descended, thick, carrying the smell of rotting wood and something reminiscent of old meat. With a flashlight in hand, Olivia climbed step by step, heart pounding. The attic was more organized than expected. Stacked boxes, furniture covered with sheets, an old sewing machine. But what caught her attention was the back corner, where the floor seemed darker, as if dust avoided that spot. There was a small low table, surrounded by carved marks on the wood. In the center, a tiny chair, too small for an adult, and on the chair, a mask made of coarse fabric, without eyes or mouth, only the symbol embroidered where a face should be. "What the hell is this?" Olivia whispered, bringing the flashlight closer. On the walls around the corner were charcoal drawings, faceless children, tall, thin figures, circles of candles, a house drawn from different angles. In every drawing, one thing repeated: a larger figure, always behind everything, leaning against the walls, too tall, too thin, with a third mark where a face should be. When Olivia turned to go downstairs, the flashlight failed. The beam flickered, died, returned weak. It was just enough for her to see, for an instant, the shadow of someone sitting on the tiny chair, wearing the mask. A small body, motionless, head tilted. She shut her eyes, took a deep breath, opened them again. The chair was empty, but the mask was now facing her directly, though no one had touched it. Meanwhile, downstairs, Noah sat in the kitchen staring at a glass of milk. He didn't want to drink it. The milk smelled strange, like iron and wet earth. He looked at the window and outside saw something that froze him. In the glass reflection, the kitchen seemed darker. He saw himself sitting at the table. But behind him, in the reflection, stood a tall, very thin woman wearing an old dress dragging on the floor, faceless, the symbol drawn like an open wound where eyes should be. She slowly lifted a long, pale hand and set it gently on Noah's shoulder. But he didn't feel any real touch. He only saw it. "Noah," the voice echoed inside his head, not in the air. "I can see you so well." He dropped the glass. The crash brought Maggie running to the kitchen. What happened? Noah couldn't speak. He only pointed at the window, shaking. When Maggie looked, she saw only the normal reflection of the kitchen, and her own face, pale, with deep dark circles. The day dragged on, heavy over everyone. Ethan tried calling a realtor to rush the sale of the house, but no call connected. The phone made a strange sound, like static mixed with whispers. When he tried to listen more closely, a distant voice murmured beneath the interference, "The house is not for sale. It has only changed owners." At night, the real collapse began. At 3:03, the living room clock ticked again, only to stop at the same time. The candles stored in a drawer lit themselves inside the circle. Eleanor's notebook, left closed on the table, opened to a specific page, where a phrase pulsed, as if the ink were still wet. "First, take the site, then break the bond, then the blood chooses." From upstairs came a dry thud, a violent impact. Olivia rushed down the stairs, nearly crashing into the wall. She found Ethan collapsed in the hallway, his nose bleeding, eyes unfocused. "Dad." He tried to speak, but his tongue felt heavy. She was on the ceiling," he murmured, pointing weakly. Olivia looked up. The ceiling beams were carved with deep scratches, as if long nails had gouged them. Among the marks, the symbol appeared again, burned into the wood. Noah stepped into the hallway, a strange smile on his face, a smile that didn't match his tear-filled eyes. "She wants us to stay together," he said, in a distant tone that didn't sound like his own. "Grandma promised I'd stay with her, that I would be important, that Norveth needs me." Maggie's knees went weak. "Noah, who told you that name?" "She whispers in my ear while you sleep," he answered. "She said you shouldn't have left when you were young, that you broke the promise. Now she's going to fix everything." At that moment, every door in the house slammed at once. The windows locked on their own, glass shaking with a force not from the wind. The house was no longer a place. It was a throat closing around them. And somewhere inside the walls, something began to laugh. A coarse, rasped sound that didn't seem human. Something that finally had room to grow. 5. Final confrontation with horror. Maggie knew with painful clarity that if she didn't act that night, she never could. The house was alive, not metaphorically, but as an ancient organism, conscious, hungry. Every door that shut itself, every flickering light, every stretching shadow was a muscle contracting, preparing to swallow. She grabbed Eleanor's notebook again, not as a horror piece, but as a survival manual. Among the rituals dedicated to Norveth, she found something different, almost hidden between glued pages, a short text about breaking the bond. If the blood that offered recedes, the house turns against it, but there is a chance, minimal, to break the oath. 3 things are required: the true name, the inverted symbol, and refusal spoken aloud by the sacrifice itself. The sacrifice, Maggie whispered. He wants Noah. Olivia beside her held a lit candle, hands shaking. Mom, what are we going to do? Maggie breathed deeply. Her eyes burned, not only with fear, but with a rising anger since the moment she realized her own mother had sold her to a cult before she was even born. We're getting him out, and if I have to negotiate with hell itself, I will. The house seemed to listen. The walls cracked. The lights flickered harder. Silence followed so deep they could hear their own blood moving through their veins. Noah sat in the living room, inside the circle of candles, sitting on the floor. He didn't remember going there. He just blinked. And suddenly he was in the center of the symbol. The candles surrounded him, and he felt something climbing up his spine, a presence stretching inside him like cold fingers. In front of him, he saw his grandmother. Eleanor, however, was not like in the coffin. She was whole, young, beautiful, but her eyes were completely black, and her skin looked pulled backward, like a poorly fitted mask. My boy, she whispered without moving her lips. You're finally where you belong. Behind her, the shadow of something larger leaned into the ceiling, too tall to fit into a defined form. Crossing walls, candles, floor, a body made of condensed darkness, with 3 glowing marks where a face should be. Not eyes, not a mouth. 3 wounds of inverted light. Norveth. When Maggie and Olivia entered the room, a freezing wave nearly knocked them down. The candles threatened to go out, but grew stronger, as if feeding on their presence. Noah! Maggie shouted, trying to cross the circle. An invisible force flung her backwards, slamming her against the wall. The impact stole her breath. Olivia ran to help her up, tears streaming down her face. You cannot take him, Margaret. Eleanor's voice echoed through the room, speaking from every corner at once. He has been chosen. Blood must pay. You fled, but your children did not. Maggie lifted the notebook with difficulty. On the rupture ritual page, the symbol was drawn upside down. She grabbed a piece of charcoal from the floor and began scribbling the inverted symbol over the one already on the rug, her lines shaking. The house reacted like a wounded animal. The walls trembled, frames crashed down, ceiling groaned. Noah screamed, clutching his head. Stop, Mom. You're hurting him. Olivia sobbed but helped, reinforcing the lines harder as if trying to tear the floor. The shadow on the ceiling writhed, trying to avoid the symbol. A horrible sound, like bones breaking, echoed through the room. You think you can undo what was promised? Norveth spoke, clearly now, its voice scraping at every mind in the room. I waited generations for this body, for this house. You're just a mistake in the path. Maggie fell to her knees but kept going, her hands numb, heart racing, her entire body aching. She looked directly at Noah, trapped within the circle, his eyes shifting between normal and darkness. Noah! She screamed. Repeat after me! I can't, he murmured, voice not his own. He's here. He likes me. Repeat! Maggie roared. This began with our blood, but we choose how it ends. The candles shot into taller flames. Olivia, crying, held Noah's hand through the invisible barrier. His skin felt cold as ice. "Noah, please." The boy's eyes trembled. For a moment the darkness retreated. He saw his mother, his sister, fear, despair. He saw the house from inside, alive, filled with things moving in the walls, faces trapped in plaster, shapeless bodies stretched between the beams, and he understood. If he stayed, he would never be himself again. Noah swallowed hard, voice cracking. "I refuse." The words were too heavy for such a small body. "Say it properly," Norveth's voice roared, shaking the floor. Noah shut his eyes, every ounce of strength focused into a sentence. "I refuse to be yours. I refuse your name. I am not yours. I will never be yours." The room exploded in silent thunder. The candles went out at once. The symbol on the floor glowed inverted, as if burning from the inside out. The shadow on the ceiling shrank, crushed as if forced inward, every piece imploding on itself. Eleanor screamed, a sound that belonged to no human throat. Her body twisted, skin splitting in dark lines of light, until she dissolved into fragments of shadow sucked into the walls. For a moment, everything stopped. The house went mute, and then it began collapsing. 6. Dark ending. The living room ceiling was the first to give way. A thunderous crash shook the entire house as the beams caved in, dust falling in cascades. Ethan, who had been disoriented in the hallway, head throbbing, ran toward the screams. He found a nightmare scene. The symbol burning on the floor, walls pulsing as if breathing. Maggie and Olivia clutching Noah in the center of the circle as everything around them crumbled. "We need to get out," he yelled, pulling them. As they ran toward the front door, the house fought back. Stair steps rose as if trying to catch their ankles. The windows exploded inward, shards of glass floating for a second, before embedding into walls like teeth. From the portrait hallway, frames fell one by one, and for a brief moment Maggie saw, behind each broken portrait, something trapped inside the wall. Skinless faces, mouths frozen in eternal screams, hands pushing through plaster. The house did not store memories, it stored pieces. When Ethan finally grabbed the doorknob, a shock shot up his arm, a mix of electricity and ice. The door felt fused into the frame, sealed from within. He turned to Maggie, desperate. "It's locked. It won't open." Maggie scanned the room, panting. The house was seconds from burying them alive. And in the chaos, something caught her eye. Eleanor's necklace, still around the corpse in the coffin, now toppled in the corner after the floor split. The same symbol, the key. She ran to the coffin, the floor cracking beneath her. She yanked the necklace so hard it snapped the chain and tore a piece of dry skin from her mother's neck. The blood that gave, she remembered from the notebook, must be the blood that undoes. Without hesitation, Maggie squeezed the symbol in her hands until her fingers bled. The metal seemed to drink the blood, warming like a living thing. Then she ran back to the door and pressed the necklace against the wood. For one long second, nothing. Then a deep cracking sound. Not wood, not glass, something older, like ancient bones, echoed through the entire house. The door exhaled and the lock turned by itself. "Now!" Ethan shouted. They were practically spat out by the house. As soon as they crossed the doorway, a violent wind shoved them onto the porch. Behind them, the house moaned, walls twisting, windows darkening from inside out as if someone were extinguishing the world within. Olivia turned just in time to see one last time something press against the upstairs window. A shapeless hand. 3 glowing marks where a face should be. Then everything collapsed. Eleanor Price's house fell inward, like a body folding in on itself. But it didn't make the sound it should have. Instead of a thunder of wood and stone, what echoed was a muted thump, like a distant sigh. As if, rather than falling, the house had been pulled somewhere deeper. Silence followed. Only wind passed over the now debris-covered land. The living room clock, buried under the rubble somewhere, had stopped forever. It read 3:03. Days later, police, reporters, and curious locals flooded Hollow Creek. The official version was simple. Old structure, heavy rain, collapse. a nearly ordinary tragedy in a forgotten town. No one mentioned the strange markings carved into the inner beams, nor the layers of bones mixed in the foundation, bones far too small to belong to adults. The Cole family left town without looking back. Noah spent weeks without speaking. Olivia had nightmares every night, seeing the house rebuild itself, brick by brick, in slow motion. Maggie thought the nightmare was over. She thought. Months later, now in a new house, in another city, on a busy, noisy street that seemed too safe for anything supernatural, Maggie called Noah for dinner. "Noah, the food is on the table." Silence. She went to his room and found him sitting on the bed, staring at the wall. On the white plaster, 3 lines crossed a circle, drawn with something dark and still wet. "Who did this?" Maggie asked, voice trembling. Noah slowly turned his head. His eyes were the same, but something inside them, a different gleam, a recognition she didn't want to see. "I don't remember," he answered with a small, strange smile. "But sometimes I feel like the house still calls me. It's farther away, but not gone." The Maggie tried to erase the symbol, but the harder she scrubbed, the more it fused into the wall. That night, when the kitchen clock struck 3 on, a sound echoed through the new house. 3 knocks, slow, precise, not on the door, not on the roof, from inside the walls. And for a moment, Maggie was certain she felt the floor vibrate beneath her feet, as if somewhere she couldn't see, something ancient had just found a way back.